My name is Matt Sokup, and I work for Microsoft. I'm a principal cloud advocate, and today we're going to be talking about lower the learning curve or onboarding people to your apps in record time. I don't know about record time, but we're going to help reduce the time that is needed to have people onboard to your apps, and not only people, but also help yourself get started working with applications, both on your computer and on various other computers as well. So really just kind of reducing the friction needed to get the inner development loop going and making your life easier as you go on. So, and the reason we want to do that is because onboarding is difficult. Here is an example application, and we won't be building this, but this is what something could look like. You have just a ton of different Azure services, ton of different, if you're doing microservices, you can have a bunch of different ones. The microservices could be written in different languages. The microservices could have their own database. You could have web apps involved. Again, all different languages, different databases, different storage accounts. It's hard to get started. It's hard to get started both from a documentation point of view, let people know what's going on in the code. It's hard to get started as far as setting up your dev environment. It's hard to get started as far as maintaining various Azure connections. Not only is it hard to get started, it's hard to keep things up to date. It's hard to maintain. And so we can help along with this. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to help keep everything up to date. We're going to help new people get started, and we're also going to help existing folks with your web application or your Azure application stay up to date and stay productive. So that's what we want to do. We're going to stay productive. And we're going to talk about managing Azure connections. Not more than just connections, but managing Azure services to your apps. We're going to talk about configuring development environments as well, making sure that this machine, what works on this machine here, works on this machine here, and it'll work on your machine and anybody's machine. Get everybody up and running quickly. Provision and deploy code. We're going to make sure that one Azure environment, that we can repeat that and have somebody working on our code be able to repeat everything and have it up and running. So essentially reduce the works on my machine, but in the cloud. And then code tours. So interactive documentation. So somebody wants to get started, they can actually click through something and have real live, now I want to say live, but interactive code tours to more than just reading, at least in C#, the whack, this is what it does, but rather step by step, jumping through the code and to know why things work the way they do, and maybe not even necessarily in a linear order as well. All right, so this is my guy. He's going to be the person that we're going to take a tour with through everything today. And Outlook recently has just a ton of different like clip art and stock images, and this one is a cutout. And I picked him because probably he looks like me, and I think I had the same shirt somewhere. So, and he thinks exactly the way I think. And his first thought is, I don't have time to manage the Azure connections and the code. It's a big pain to do. And I first learned about the Visual Studio Connected Services, which will help us out, I would say a couple of months ago. And I've seen them. I've seen them in Visual Studio, but honestly, I was like, this seems like a headache. I don't want to learn it. I can handle it all in the code myself. Why would I want to use it? Well, I'm going to show you why it's so fun and why it's great. And so what it does is that it adds Azure integration into your code, and it handles all that Azure integration. It actually handles provisioning the resources and downloads the appropriate NuGets and boilerplate code for you as well. So it kind of provisions everything up, and not only that, it helps you out in the dev environment. And there's just a ton of connected services that you can do, all the way from Key Vault or SignalR, Redis Cache, to even Active Directory, App Config, Blob Storage, Cosmos, and there's even more. There's like RabbitMQ and so on. So there's tons of different connected services that you can use for your projects in Visual Studio. So we're going to just take a jump right in and start talking about this. All right, so what I have here, first off, is just a web API and a models project. And so the models project is really, you know what this is? It's just the file new web API. And so the models project is just a weather forecast record, and I'll run it to show what we have thus far. Brand new, essentially, file new. And the reason I'm keeping it kind of simple, it'd be an easy onboarding experience, but I wanted to not get in the way of what we're going to talk about. But let's run it and show what it looks like. All right, here we go up. And yesterday I made a joke about this computer being slow because I can't get a new one because of supply chain, and that joke still stands today because it still is a little bit slow. And so we have Swagger tooling involved, and go to the weather forecast, try it out, execute, and down below all we have are the various weather forecasts that come out. Date, temperature, summary, and then the temperature. Nothing tricky going on here, really, but what we're going to do is make it better. And so the first thing that I want to do in order to make it better is have something in here where I can report incorrect conditions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to report incorrect conditions over into an Azure queue, or a storage queue, and that way something else can pick it up out of that storage queue and do something fun with it. So what I want to do here is the connected services. By right-clicking on that and hitting add, you can see the various different ones here from Mongo, RabbitMQ, SQLite database, but what I want to add is Azure Storage, which is right on top. And so this is going to actually take me through something of a wizard. And it looks like, because there's publish down here below, if you do right-click publish, it's the same overall window. And what's nice here is recently they've added more. When I say they added more, they've added more development options, things that can actually run on your computer locally that help you out to, so you don't actually have to hit Azure Storage in the cloud. You can start running everything locally and not incur any of those costs. And the one I like here, the one that I have highlighted, is running it in a container. So now we can actually have this container run, well, what a container does, essentially run anywhere. The second one is a Node.js based emulator, and having that then is kind of limited to just my machine. But if I have it in a container, I just need to have Docker installed, and that can be running an Azure Storage emulator. So that's the one I'm going to pick. Hit next. I'll wait for it. And then I'm just going to name my container name, what the image is, and then what ports I want to have open for it. Each of these ports, the first one, the 10,000 is for blob, 10,001 is for queue, and 10,002 is for table storage. And this is just stuff that you would, that's in the documentation. So I'll call it Azurite, hit next, ask me where I want to store my secrets, and I'm just going to put it in a local secrets file instead of Azure Key Vault, which I could do, which would create an Azure Storage Key Vault file, and just give it a name. So I'm just going to call the storage connection string, like that. And this last one is saying what it's going to do. And this is actually the neat part. It's saying it's going to create some code for me, new things up. It's going to download the appropriate NuGet packages, and it's going to create the secret store. So it's going to take care of a bunch of boilerplate stuff for me that I don't have to worry about. Finish it. It goes through and it's going through and adding everything. NuGet packages here, and now it's going to go through added code. It went pretty quickly, but it'll take a quick tour of what just happened. Open up the, I'll actually go like this, manage the NuGet packages. And when that opens, I have the Azure Storage blobs, file shares, queues, all there for me to the connected services downloaded the appropriate packages. Actually, they just updated, so what I'm going to do is update everything. So I have the latest and greatest. I was hoping with Visual Studio 17.3 they would go get everything for us, but that's not there. But now we have the latest and greatest of everything. Great. Another thing it did is it added the secrets.json file, which essentially is a way to manage user secrets. And you can see it just put various connection strings here. And all it's saying is use development storage equals true, which the SDKs know means go out to the container for it. So this is all an SDK thing when it says use development storage equals true. And then finally, you can see the program.cs has a little check mark by it, meaning I actually did something to it. And there's a couple cool things that happen here. Is that the first one is what's highlighted here. It went through and it actually created a way for me to new up into the services so I can do dependency injection or whatever, a blob service client and a queue service client for me. Putting this boilerplate code in there so I don't have to worry about it. It also created a whole new Azure Client Factory Builder Extensions class, which is a way to essentially new up the blob service client, extension methods to essentially return the blob service client depending on what you want to pass in. Again, I didn't create this, the connected service did. So I'm not actually having to go through and remember everything to manage it. It's doing it itself. So it's helping me out get started with Azure, or at least the Azure SDK for Blob. And if I was going to do other connected services like app config or Key Vault, it would do the same thing for me. All right. And so then what I want to do to actually, one thing I'm going to show off then is in the publish. As soon as this shows up, is I'm going to create a new one. And if I would do Azure here, so if I would actually go through and I try to publish something, it would have, come on, let's do this. It would show up as, skip that step. Create me a published profile. And then way down at the bottom, it'll show up as a service dependency. And I'm going to be able then to manage my storage. I could connect to it to a real Azure storage service. Same thing with the secrets, where I could connect to an Azure Key Vault. So some cool things that I can do. It's taking care of all those connections for me. All right, so I'm not going to save that. But one thing I do want to show off then is actually saving to the queue, which is done in the program file. I will minimize all this. And down here, I already have the post created, so I just have to on-comment it. I'll save you from having me to watch me type. I'll add in the NuGets, or the using statements. All right. So all we're doing is, this is a minimal API, creating a report incorrect conditions post, and then using the, from the services, I'm getting my service, queue service client, and then getting the queue client and then just sending it off. Creating the queue if it doesn't exist, sending the message. So I'm just using the queue client that's there. I have to know what the SDK is, but I can use it. It takes care of newing everything up for me and so on. So it's managing the actual down low portion of the Azure Storage SDK. So I'll run it again, and I will have now the post for the report incorrect conditions. Try it out. And here I have just a forecast ID, which is what I'm passing in with a GUID to it. Execute it. All right, and we did get the 200 coming back. So if I open up the Azure Storage Explorer, I can actually connect to the container. that it's running in, the storage container, and see that it's been popped in there. And I go to the queue. You can see I have my incorrect conditions queue, which I was putting it in. And let's see, 8:10, that's today's, so it's right there. Cool. So that's running everything. Visual Studio started up my container for me. I just needed to get the connection strings out of the secrets file. I'm not sure why that didn't work, but we're all good as far as that goes. All right. So what I'll do is shut everything down. Then now I'll have Visual Studio managing the container, managing the container for storage, managing the SDK. It kind of just did all of its work, all the low-level work, and all I needed to do was this right here is actually go out and call it. All right, so what I want to do real quick, so I don't forget later, is shut down Azurite. Great. So what I did is shut down the Azurite, the storage container, for this next portion. So this next part is setting up a machine. I have this little machine here. If I had another one, when I say little, it's not very powerful. If I had another machine, it's going to take a time for me to set up Visual Studio. It's going to take some time for me to install the .NET SDK. It's going to take some time for me to install Azurite onto there. It takes a bunch of time to do everything. And so what we can do is set up dev containers, which essentially is packaging your whole developer stack into a container. So what it's doing, and I'm going to switch over to VS Code here and leave Visual Studio for a while, is that it's going to take your Visual Studio Code experience and put that into a container itself. So it's like you're going to actually sit down at a container and start writing code, including things like extensions. So you could switch over to dark mode or light mode. You could have like your Azure extensions, all the extensions you have working locally will move over into this container, and you can do the full debugging experience, like setting breakpoints and stepping through. So it's like you have a terminal, like you're just sitting down running the container. It's a consistent dev setup. That's the best thing. You have a consistent developer setup across the team. All you're going to be handing off is, and we'll show this, a dev container.json file, and then the code, and then you just mount it as a dev container and off you run. And then it works with GitHub code spaces as well. So you don't even need your machine set up with a Visual Studio or Docker. All you need to do is have a web browser, have GitHub up and running, our code spaces up on GitHub up and running, and then away you go. So let's see that running. Let's see both dev containers running locally and then hit up GitHub code spaces as well. So what I'm going to do for the dev containers is open up Visual Studio Code. Probably going to have to open up a new window. And I will open up not a file, but a folder. So right now this is all locally. And as it starts going, I want to make sure I get the VS Code folder in here, otherwise I'll copy it out of somewhere else. All right, so this is everything that we had before. The API file, the models file, everything as before. So what I do want to do then is start with actually running it, just to make sure that we are okay. All right, so we have everything here, and this should be able to set up and actually run for us. So in order to get this to run in a dev container, what I would do is open this down here, this green button, open a remote window, and then I can do add development container configuration files. And this actually gives me a start of a wizard that lets me pick out whether I want to run in C# or activating extensions. Super slow, but I'll show you what it actually comes out to be. I'll get this, devcontainer.json. And this devcontainer.json actually just says, all right, I want to forward these ports. It says what your Docker file you want to use and what your workspace folder should be. And then if you want to run a post. All right, it actually did show up. And if you want to run a post create command and who you want to connect as. So it's kind of sort of like a container file, but for the whole development container site. And then you can have a Docker file. And this Docker file is for the code itself. So what I'm saying is I want to run the latest version of .NET 6. I'm not going to run any node. And all I'm doing is setting up for this site here, my code. And then finally, the Docker Compose file. And why I'm having a Docker Compose file is, first, I'm doing the app. The app is my code. And then second, I'm using Azurite. So I'm using the Azurite, the storage container here. So what I'm going to do now is reopen this whole thing, but inside a container. All right, so it's going to take a little bit to spin up, but when it comes back, I will actually be in the container rather than on my C drive. All right, so now I'm up in the dev container itself. So I'm running in a container. And come on. Gosh, this is nice and fast today. So what I do have two ports that are open and they match back to local address ports. So these ports right here, they're running in the container itself. And then what I can do is go to debug, launch the debug, and once it runs through, and that's just a OmniSharp error. I have my build task running, and it's going to launch all the container, everything in here. We should be good, and now I'm actually debugging. Have it open. Now I see I get a connection isn't private that's because my HTTPS certificate's not trusted locally. It's only trusted on the dev container itself, but I will skip over that. And I get my Swagger tooling, hit try it out, execute it, and then it should return a 200. I bet you I have a breakpoint set. I do. So my breakpoint set is here, and I can actually then step through it, see various things in there, run it again, and I get the 200. And so what's interesting then is if I go back to my emulator, I'm now should be attached to the dev container one rather than the one that was running locally. So if I hit refresh, I should just see one there, which was just entered at 1701 UTC, so 10 o'clock our time. So now that's actually kind of neat. So what I'm seeing is just the dev container one. So this is running in VS Code. So all I need to actually run this is Docker and VS Code on my laptop. Even better though, because I have this dev container.json, and then the supporting Docker Compose and Docker file, what I can do then is jump on out to GitHub, go to the repo where I have it, and then I can do code spaces. So I can create a code space then on practice. And that's going to ask me what I want to have here, and it's going to go bump through and download, connect to it, and it's going to go through and actually build a container for everything. And it just take a minute or two, and so I will actually be able to run all my code here, but actually through the browser. And I'll look at the logs as we come through. And now I don't need to have my development environment on my machine at all. No VS Code, no .NET, no container for Azurite for the storage, nothing. So you can imagine if I actually started going even higher or more complex in my development stack, where I had more containers running for microservices or for Redis or whatnot, I could have them all running in the browser like this. And then we should be almost done. And I could actually run the code space in VS Code on the desktop if I did have it, if I wanted to actually type locally. But once it actually gets up here, I will actually have a Visual Studio Code in the browser that I can actually work through. All right, so now the container is built, connecting to it. And then the next step will actually be to see it here. So this is Visual Studio Code in the browser. And now what it's doing is going through and getting all my extensions because I'm logged in to VS Code, so the extensions kind of follow me around. And so it's going to install them all. And then I can do things such as change the color theme, like I mentioned before, so I can go to things like Dracula, like that, and see like so. And what I'm going to want to do is restore everything to make sure I have my NuGets. All right, we should be good. And then I can go through and start debugging. And this is actually going to be faster than what was on my machine because the VM that it's running in the cloud is a little bit bigger. So I might get right here that is unable to connect to it. And that's because the ports need to be public and running on HTTPS. So let's see if it runs through and if it can connect to it or not. I am going to say it can't. So I can go through and I can change the port visibility. We'll change that to public and make sure we're running HTTPS. All right, let's try this again. And here it comes. All right, so I'm now running on CodeMill Mat, lower learning curve, and then a variable name on 7275. If I do report current conditions, try it out, execute it, and I should be getting the 200 back, and I am. So the one thing I haven't figured out yet is how to connect to the storage container that's running in code spaces, but I would imagine all I would need to do is get an extension that can see it. What I mean by connecting to it is actually getting a nice web user interface for it. I could obviously go through and do something similar to what I'm doing down here and enumerate everything if I wanted to, but a nice Azure Storage Explorer to be running in VS Code to see everything. However, we're up and we're running. One thing I did want to show you before we get out of here is in the app settings file, I had to change what the connection string was from I use development to actually using a real connection string. And the thing about it is we're connecting with Azurite. So just the name Azurite for what we called it in the Docker compose file. So if I would have called it something else here, like Super Azurite, I would have had to call it Super Azurite in the app settings file. Otherwise, I'm connected to it. And the connection string itself is documented in the docs, what it needs to be. So it's well documented, and it actually is not a secret to get to the Azurite container. All right. So what I'm going to do then is this. I'm just going to get all right, so our next step then is that there's a lot of effort then, as we've seen, to go through and get those resources provisioned and get those resources deployed, but it's hard, right? No time to go through and do it. And so I'm talking about the resources up on Azure. They go through and get the web app deployed, to get the storage deployed. And if we were going to do something like this, there's a whole lot of other effort involved with that. So what I want to show off is something called the Azure Developer CLI. And so this is brand new. So this was just hit public preview a couple weeks ago. And what this does is that it supports end-to-end workflows. It lets you do Azure service provisioning, all from the command line. It lets you do project deployment as well from the command line. And lets you set up GitHub Action workflow and support. So it lets you set up CI/CD systems. So it's kind of like an orchestrator of Azure-based applications. So it lets you set up the Azure services. It lets you deploy the code to them. You can even set up the CI/CD pipelines for it, all from one spot. So this is, once you have the code created, it takes you that next step to get everything up into Azure. So if you have a dev container, you made your code up into, you made your code portable across development environments. This makes it easy to get it up to Azure. So let's take a look at the Azure Dev CLI then. All right. So what I am going to do is make sure I am running on the correct branch. All right, good. I'm going to close my dev container. All right, so I'm back to running everything locally. Great. And so what I can do then, and I am going to go off on a limb and start deleting some files so I can show you from where is my delete button? All right, so in order to get this all set up, what you all need to do is actually command line. So I'm in the correct folder. I'm at the top portion of it, and I want to get rid of the Azure.yaml. How about we go in here then to do that? All right, so I'm just setting up for it. All right, I just want to make sure I can build it. Now, all right, so we should be ready to go pretty soon. And so then to set up the Azure CLI, what we're going with then is it's called AZD. And so it gives you a ton of different options here, such as deploy, when you want to deploy the code, init, when you actually want to init everything up in Azure, and there's just AZD up, which runs init and deploy all together. So we're going to take it one step at a time. All right, we were able to build, which is great. And so what I'm going to do then is do AZD init, which is going to get my project and start to get it ready for the Azure Dev CLI. All right, so first off, it's asking me, do I want to do it via a template that the team has already set up? I'm going to say no, I'm going to do it from an empty template. And now it's going to ask me for an environment name, like dev or stage or prod. So I'm just going to call this one VS Live. And then next, it should be asking me for which subscription for Azure I want to be using. And I'm going to use just East US or which location, and next will be a sub, which is that. And now it'll go through and create everything for me. So what it did is it created this .azure file and a .azure YAML file. So let's take a look at this .azure first. So it created a config file for me, just with the default environment in there called VS Live. And then from that, it created a folder. So a lot of what the Azure Dev CLI does is that it's configurable in that it looks after, like, because I call this VS Live, it's going to look in for a VS Live folder. So it works that way, where it's very tightly coupled with what you name things. And then it looks for a .env file. So again, my environment name is VS Live, and everything I just entered there, East US, this principal ID is my principal, my user, and the Azure subscription ID happens to be that. So this environment is going to, .env file is going to go forward when I actually want to do something with it and it has all the variables. So next thing I want to do is actually go through and create the infrastructure for it. And so what I wanted, and it all runs off of Bicep. So I'm going to actually just copy some in. From over here where and we'll talk through them. So the Bicep parameters file, what this does is just going out and gathering the Azure env name, the location, and the principal ID from the environment, from the VS Live environment. And then the main Bicep file. So what Bicep does is that it is a infrastructure language. So I can just check this code in, and it has all my infrastructure needed to populate things. And so here we just have some variables at the top. And then I get down to where I'm going to create a resource group. So it's going to be my name, which happens to be the name of the environment that I pass in. And then it's going to say, all right, all the resources are going to be in the resources.bicep. Open up resources.bicep. And now we get into the good stuff where I'm going to say, all right, I'm going to create a storage account. And then I'm going to create a App Insights. And then I'm going to create a web server, app plan, and then the application. So everything that I need for my application is up here, including the storage connection strings to point back to the storage account, which I just created. And you can see it's just saying account name storage.name. And over here, storage. For the keys, I'm getting the storage keys value. And the storage is up in the bicep file right here. I named it storage. So that's where it's going to get. So it's like, it is a language where you can reference variables and so on with it. All right. And so the next thing what I'm going to do then is, I think I'm all ready to deploy it up to Azure here at this point. So I can just do azd.h, and I think it's going to be Azure provision, azd provision. So it's going to look for everything that's in the env file, and then everything that's in the infra. So it is very idiomatic that the folder has to be called infra in order to get at it. So azd provision, hit enter. And because I had my Azure subscription ID here and the principal, it's going to know to go out and get that in the env file. It takes a little bit when it's going to come through and a spin, and it should say, all right, I'm going to create some things for you. And then we should be good to go. Now this also would run in a dev container as well. All right, so now it's saying I'm creating it. It's going to say this is where you can view everything from. And now it's creating Azure resources. So let's open that up where we can view things as they go. And here we go. It's already created the App Insights. We have the resource group, the VS Live, what we call the environment. That's up and running. And as things pop in here, we will be able to see them as they get done. So I'll go back here as we watch them spin up. So what is nice here is that we're not having to worry, once we get that infrastructure set up, I don't have to worry about how to set up, or once we get those bicep files set up, I don't have to worry about how to set up the app plan or the storage account or anything like that. I just have to do azd provision and it takes care of everything for me. And so if I have another developer working on my team, they can do the same thing. If they have their own Azure account that they can go through, all they would have to change is what's in the env file, and off they go. In fact, we could have the infra file sitting here for them. .azure is a not checked in to GitHub by default. The git ignore for Visual Studio, when you set that up, has .azure not checked in. It has it ignored. So we would do azd init. It would walk you through those steps and would create all this for you. So we check in infra with our infrastructure as code, walk through azd init to create the environment and the main parameters.json, and then we off and running to do something like this. Now everything's created. I should be able to go back here, refresh it, and now I see everything out here. My infrastructure is created. So then the next thing I want to do is actually deploy everything to it. And that's going to actually happen. In order for me to do that, I have to update this Azure YAML file. And to add things into there, I am going to go through and just open it up so I can get everything. I'm saying what services I want deployed, and that's going to be devproductivity.api, that project, C# in the app service. All right, so this right here, this devproductivity.api is important. That's because back here in the resources.bicep, I gave it a tag called devproductivity.api. So now Azure.yaml knows for this to look for a service with that same tag, and that's where it can deploy things to. So just do azd deploy. I want to make sure I have everything saved before I do that. All right. And it's going to go through, zip things up and do a zip deploy and push it up there. So right now I believe AZD, Azure Developer CLI, works with App Service, works with container apps, Azure Container Apps. It works with functions, and more are coming down the road. I think it works with a couple other things right now. So going through, compiled it, compressing everything, and then it will actually publish the deployment package up to Azure. So once that's done, I should be able to run it in Azure. Everything good to go. And as it's going, let's look at the connection string. Opening up the web app, I'll go down to configuration. Once that opens up, you can see I have my storage connection string for the queue and the blob. And let's do the advanced edit so we can make it just a tad bigger. And it's actually pulling out for the real one that we have connected up. So core.azure.net for this name of the account. So the bicep files took care of all the hard work for me. All right, we're deployed. So I should be able to go then to here, browse to it, and then once it starts up, what I will get is this, and that's because I don't have my Swagger endpoint enabled for release mode, but I think I can do weather forecast and see all the weather forecasts coming out. So now I actually deployed it and everything worked great. But one thing I do want to do then is it'd be nice if I had Swagger here. So I will go back into my code and create a GitHub action so I can actually have CI/CD up and running. All right. So it's development. All right, we should be good to go. Great. So what I'm going to do here then is run azd.h, and it has an azd pipeline. Config, if I could type that right. And so what this is actually going to do, once it's done spinning, is that it creates a service principal for me. It's going through right now and updating GitHub and adding secrets to it. And let's look, settings. And if I go down to no, not there. There we go, secrets, actions. It's going to add my Azure credentials, environment name, location, and subscription ID. The same thing that we had in the .env file. It's going to add this to the repository. That way I have them all and I can actually run a GitHub action and deploy with it. So that's what we did here. And then it's what I'm going to need to do before I hit yes, I want to deploy, is create a GitHub action itself. And so it's azure-dev-yaml. And what I'm going to do is make sure I publish on both branches, and we'll also say practice. And it's saying run right here, this Azure Dev CLI image, which has like .NET built into it. And it's saying use the Azure credentials, and then running the AZD provision, which we just ran, then running AZD deploy. So it's going through and using GitHub Actions to run what we just ran. Make sure we're saved up, hitting this yes. I'm going to commit, and then GitHub Actions are currently disabled for your repository. Well, what I'm going to do then is just kick them off manually. All right, let's see here. Pushing everything up, and so we should get an action to run then. All right, so we have this new code up and running. The action has been pushed up, it sees it, and it's going to go through the build process and everything that we've seen before. Check out, log into Azure, provision everything. If it sees that things have already been provisioned, it's going to skip over that step and then deploy it for us. And so while that's going, what I want to show you, we'll just take a next step then, is the documentation. It's always tough, right? When you're writing docs, it's tough to help people get going, and nobody writes good documentation. It's tough, and who wants to do it? Usually you leave it for people who are brand new to go through the code and figure it out themselves. But Visual Studio has this thing called Code Tours. It's an extension, and what it does, it gives you a step-by-step walkthrough of the code base. So it allows you to highlight important areas and lets you have comments essentially come to life. And so this actually is pretty easy to add in. So I am going to close everything I don't need right now and then go in here. And so as I mentioned, the code space, or the Code Tours, is an extension. Which evidently is not on here yet, so I'll get it on. So we're still deploying everything. So it's called via Visual Studio Code, Code Tour. install the extension itself. And now, once we get it going, I can add things. You see that it's right here. It's letting me do stuff, and it should come up. Where is it? I'll restart code. All right, it's down here now. So what I can do is it shows up down here saying code tour. I can then start recording a tour. Fast machine, which is making everything difficult. As you can see, it's spinning right now. We'll take a quick peek back to see how our deployment is working. Looks like we have completed our job. So everything ran through. Azure Dev Deploy, we ran through all our resources. Let's see if we have the endpoint up and running. And hopefully, Swagger should be here. Yeah, and then now we have it. Try it out. Let's change it to be 7D as a start. Execute it. 200 back. And then what I can go through and do is refresh. See my VS Live resource group. See my storage account. And then storage browser. Queues. My incorrect condition queue. And then I did hit it twice, but they both are 35 with the 7D for the message body. So they're there. So I used AZD to push everything up. And what's nice about AZD then is I'll go back here. Actually, let's just run it from here. Don't show again. I can do AZD down, and it'll go through and it'll delete everything for me as well. So it's a nice way to actually do your development. Bring it up when you need it, take it back down when you don't. All right. All right, so what I'm going to do then is create a new code tour, and we'll just call this VS Live. And I'm going to say allow this tour apply to all versions of the repo. And then I can say something like this. Start a new comment or new discussion on comment these lines. And then add a step to the tour. So we can see here, on comment these lines, I add a step to the tour. And then what I can do is so now what I can start doing is step through the code and see various things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in linear order as well. So what I mean by that is I can go into this factory setting and just say right here, one line. and it can jump in between different files for me as well. So you can actually take the user on a step-by-step tour of what's going on with the code, which is kind of nice. And then you can change a line or delete the step as you go. It creates a tours.file, and you can have like the VS Live in here, and you can see actually where it's all going. So you can actually edit it by hand if you want as well. But folks can then see what you're up to, and it give them a nice presentation of everything. So, and I'll go through and delete all my Azure resources. But with that said, my guy's now happy that we are all finished with everything. So what we covered though, connected services helps you manage the Azure resources as you go. What else did we cover in the middle? Oh, dev containers. Bring your whole Azure environment together to whether it's in code spaces, whether it's in VS Code on the machine. All you're doing is creating a dev.container.json file with a Docker file for your environments. And then the entire environment, whatever you can containerize, can move along with you. And then the Azure Dev CLI, which I find is really neat in that you can really move your whole dev container or your whole Azure environment along with you by doing azd init, then azd provision, azd deploy, and then even azd down. So when you have your individual Azure resources, bring them up, bring them down as you need it to go. And then finally, code tours. Bring people along with you on your code so you can give them step-by-step ideas of what is actually happening in various portions of the code. Bring them on board super fast. So with that said, session survey, please. I read them all. Let me know how we did. And feel free to reach out, email or Twitter if you have any questions about this or anything .NET at all. I'm always glad to help, or anything Azure at all as well. So with that said, thank you very much. I appreciate you all coming.